I really hope if you've gotten nothing else from this episode and previous ones where all of us are in the studio talking about these things, a big part of my goal is for you to realize there are real people here who are reading your applications. We are just 4 people who have our own interests, who have our own hobbies, who play the flute, who are going to the Grand Canyon, who wore glasses on Guantanamo Bay. This is Admissible. I'm Natalie Blazer, Dean of Admissions at UVA Law. For the second time in Admissible history, we have 3 guests in the studio today, so I'm very excited. In addition to getting real with the 3 guests about the 2026 cycle, we are also getting cozy. Perfect for a cold day like today. It's a rare occasion to have 3 of us, but I love it when listeners can hear from as many different people as possible, particularly when those people are the ones making decisions on their applications and interviewing them and so on. So at this point, my guests, I don't think need an introduction, but quickly, I'll just have you all go around and introduce yourselves, your name, what you do in the office, and maybe a fun fact about yourself. Jen, you want to start?
Hello, I'm Jennifer Echemendia. I'm a director of admission in our office. And a fun fact about me is that I got a hole-in-one at St. Andrews on the ladies' course, the Himalayas.
What? Did we know Jen played golf?
I don't play golf. This is the putt-putt.
She plays British putt-putt.
The reason it's a fun fact is because it sounds way more impressive than it actually is, right?
Course.
It's a hole-in-one on the ladies' course.
I love it.
Yeah.
Katie?
My name is Katie Delsandro. I am also Director of Admissions. And my fun fact is that I have never seen the Grand Canyon, but I'm going later this year, and I'm very excited.
Yay. Yeah. We're excited for you.
And I'm Rosanne Ibanez, Director number 3, last but not least. And I guess my fun fact, and I will pick on my little drink sleeve here, is I went to elementary school in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, because my dad was in the military. It was a different place than it is now.
I was also going to do an icebreaker if you guys are open to it, because today, the day we're recording, January 14th, is New Year's Day, according to the Serbian Orthodox calendar. I guess my fun fact, that if people don't know, is that I'm Serbian Orthodox. So does anyone have any intentions for the new year? Since really we're starting 2026 today, technically.
So as part of our job, we do a lot of reading. And because of that, I have gradually stopped doing as much reading of physical books at home. But my intention for this year is to pick that back up because I actually really love it. So I'm 3 books into the new year already, and I am excited to keep going.
Are you listening or you're reading the physical copies?
Physically reading.
Oh,
okay.
Yes,
that's the thing.
To come shop my closet at home because I have books to get rid of.
So playing the flute was a pretty big part of my life growing up, like through elementary school, high school, and even in college. And it's sort of been put aside as professional obligations and familial obligations have come up. But my youngest just started playing the flute this year, and we played some duets at Christmas, and it was so much fun. And so I'm sort of resolved that I'll pull out the flute more, be an example of practicing on a regular basis so we can, keep the duets coming.
So you guys are the Von Trapp family. That's awesome. I love that.
I think mine is to kind of slow down a little bit. I know life has been very, very, very hectic, but I do feel like I've been dropping the ball on hey, I really love you. Or people that I have kind of lost touch with. It's not because I don't love you. So Rob, Yusuf, sorry I never pick up the FaceTimes, but please keep sending them, and I promise that one day I'll surprise you.
That's a really good one. Mine is also to make more in-person connections with friends. So let's dive in. If folks who have listened to the show before know that we have done mid-cycle debriefs in the past. We've done director debriefs. We've basically had some combination of the 3 of you in here to talk about what we're seeing this cycle, what we're liking. We're offering our candid advice. So this is not really going to be, reinventing the wheel in any respect, but I think sometimes for applicants, it's just nice to hear the voices of the people who are reading your files and know that there are real people who are reading your application and who are actually thinking about them in a meaningful way and discussing them, and that your application is not just going into the ether. So today, rather than have some sort of groundbreaking topic, we're just going to talk to you and be straightforward, as if you came into our office and asked us what our thoughts are about the cycle and what advice we have. So that's really what we're hoping to accomplish today. Again, just as a touch point, we haven't done one of these in a while, and this cycle, as most cycles have been recently, is kind of a crazy competitive one. So I'm hoping that this will help. And I'm hoping, we're not going to repeat a lot of what we said before. Some of it can't be helped because some advice is just worth repeating, but really we want it to be relevant to this cycle. We want it to be timely. As listeners, are aware, especially if they've been applying this cycle, it is another year where application volume is up. We at UVA last year, our application volume was up 30% over the year before, and this year we are up again over even that amount. And in addition to having quite a high application volume, the saturation of high LSATs and high GPAs is also once again in effect. We're very blessed at UVA to have a pool like that. We have lots of amazing people to choose from, but you can imagine how a pool that is full of strong LSATs and strong GPAs makes our jobs even harder, and I think makes some of the advice that we're going to share even more important to pay attention to, because things are happening on the margins. Now, notice I didn't say that the pool is saturated with strong applications, because there is so much more to a strong application than the LSAT and the GPA. However, historically, a strong LSAT and a strong GPA are objective markers of a competitive application. So it goes way beyond that. But knowing how many folks we have in the pool with super high numbers right now, I think it just should drive home even more that your essays, your letters of recommendation, how you conduct yourself throughout the application process, all those things are going to matter even more than ever before. So for the three of you, what I would love to do today is start with like big picture items, overall, what is our advice for people who are going through this cycle right now? And then at the end, sort of go through more pieces of the application and like specific advice for certain pieces of the application. So what do we think are the big picture items that are making the difference this cycle between someone who's going to move on to an interview and someone who's not?
So we have discussed how all of the elements matter. And, I hate to talk about this again because I feel like we've talked about it on different episodes before, but I just think it's so vital. When a law school asks you or requires, I would say, a specific short answer essay or a required writing, it is important to them. And so I think we've been calling it Q13, but like the qualities that we list out, and we say, hey, we have found that these are really important traits for successful law students and lawyers. Like, tell us how you demonstrate one of these many traits, and you don't answer the prompt. It is already, I think, a disadvantage from the start. And we've discussed in the past, like, hey, it's the first piece of writing that we get to read in your application. But, I think it's like almost very basic. I had one file that I read last week, and I loved the rest of it. And the person just wrote return, 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 and like never submitted the actual answer. And so I'm like, God, it would have been a great app, but I can't even take you that seriously because your file's really technically incomplete.
I think that's a great place to start because it's the big picture item of putting effort into the application and following instructions, no matter what piece of the app. And we can talk more specifically about Q13 later, but just today, I read a great app where the Q13, again, this is the one dealing with the qualities or the traits that we're looking for, was clearly a quote-unquote perspective essay, which we know is an essay for another school. So I understand that, putting together different components for different schools is a lot of work, but it just shows the bare minimum of interest and effort. And so this person that I think Rosanne is talking about, the person I talked about today, great numbers, great experience, great everything. But when you are competing in this pool where everybody has those things and is following instructions and is really being thoughtful about what they're submitting, that's going to make the difference. I mean, maybe more than anything else. So let's talk about something that I know Katie and actually Jen, we discussed this yesterday, you and I as well. Someone's purpose for law school. We can cut what I said a second ago about following directions being the most important thing, because this might be the most important thing. We'll just keep listeners on the hook and just say every single thing we talk about is the most important thing. This is playing out before our eyes sometimes with people who are in school and who maybe aren't doing great. But I think it's more important than ever to make this a considered choice and to really know your why. And if you don't have a purpose for law school that is clearly thought out, don't apply right now. But if you do have a purpose, it's your job to tell us in a compelling way what it is. And so sometimes that is the missing piece, and we absolutely can't move forward without that. Jen, in my office yesterday, we were talking a little bit about this, about knowing yourself. Can you explain a little bit more about what we were talking about?
Yeah, I think there are certain applications that you read, and you can just tell from the way the individual writes that they've really done some self-reflection about themselves. They understand their limits. They understand sort of the drivers for them, what really compels them and motivates them. They know when they need to seek help and advice and when it's really a time to sort of put their head down and just dig in and do the work. And I think that all is really useful in your discussion about why law school. It helps us to see that you not only know yourself, but you know something about what you're getting into and how this is going to fit into the scope of your larger life. And so, when I read things in personal statements, I like to read a lot and I like to write. I think those are great starting points for people who are thinking about law, but I want to see that an applicant's gone a little bit deeper, put some more thought into it. What sorts of life experiences have brought you to this, or what sorts of work experiences perhaps have really confirmed for you that the day-to-day practice of law is what you see yourself doing? So I think that kind of reflection is helpful. And then I would just also caution, there are times where I read applications and I think, why not a PhD in history? And so if your sort of resume and your letters of recommendation are really sort of showing a strong bend towards continuing on with a graduate degree that's not a law degree, tell me why. Tell me that you've thought about that path and you've decided actually law is the right one, and here's why.
Everything you just said, it's where you're coming from, what got you to this point, and equally important, do you know what's ahead? Do you know what a day-to-day life of a lawyer looks like? It's I don't think I've ever said this on the podcast before, probably for good reason, but being a lawyer is not for everyone. It is just not. Practicing law is not for everyone, especially if you're going to a major law firm. You are working a tremendous number of hours. And I think taking the LSAT and scoring well on the LSAT and doing well in undergrad don't necessarily mean that that's the type of job you're going to enjoy. And we are really focused on people who we think actually have longevity in a legal career. That doesn't mean they need to be practicing. None of us are right now. But I think we all agree it was a good idea to go to law school. So I think it's how much have you reflected on the day-to-day?
Yeah, I actually read an application just today that contained the statement, "There is nothing I enjoy more than taking care of children." And I thought, that's great, but that is fundamentally not a part of a legal career, right? And so that, just right off the bat, right? Yeah. I'm questioning why this person is going into law. And then that paired with an essay that's very high level, right? A broad interest, which you do need to have. But it's not enough, right? If it's not also paired with an understanding of kind of cohesion with how you want to spend your day to day.
Yes. And I think just going off of this point, work experience is more important, I think, than it has been before. And I think that's because of all the things we have just said. I think somebody who has demonstrated that they have the professional skills, that they have the work ethic, that they understand what it is like to be in the working environment is going to be really important to that knowing yourself and knowing what you're getting into. Not that KJDs cannot do it, but we are really going to be looking for those elements if there is not like a sustained period of work experience.
So I've been binging your past episodes this season in the car in preparation for being here. And the why shows up in literally every episode. Yep. So in like every context, whether it is, a center or a clinic that is so popular, or a faculty member who is doing such amazing work, or career services, like everyone is focused on the why. Employers are focused on the why. And, to kind of take it to kind of a more, this is a little bit romantic and a little bit poetic, but like I do feel like when you have a why, you can tolerate any how. And it's like, law school is hard. Like no one is ever going to tell you that it's not. Even if you're someone whose skills are well adapted to law school, like you'll have challenges, whether in your academic life or personal life. And having the why, I think, is just like it's a gas tank, right? It is the thing that's like, okay, I can pull through this. And so having that, I think, is important. And it's more important than ever when things are harder and more complicated and life is more complex.
Exactly. That's such a great point. And when you are paying for 3 years of law school, however you are paying for it, whether it's, for most people, it's some form of loans, at least partially, that can be a lot of debt. And yes, in the top legal jobs, you're going to be making multiple six figures when you're coming out. But again, those jobs come with the trade-offs we've just discussed. Extremely long hours, oftentimes tedious type of work, which, again, some people like and some people thrive at, and some people want to do that, even if it's just for the first few years of your career. But the financial piece, I also think, has to go in factoring into the why, because it will be easier to swallow, and I think, easier to wrap your head around when you're very committed to this path. I want to talk about how, when you three read files, how do you see that somebody has presented that they have the tools necessary to succeed in law school? Like Jen said, it goes beyond reading, writing, and critical thinking. Those things are a baseline. There are other, executive functioning, professional development. How do you all see in applications that somebody is going to come to UVA and not fall apart, basically?
I think one example I can point to is when somebody discusses a failure that they've faced, right? What was the reaction? How did they move forward? Did they move forward? And I can think of one I read recently that was in a Q13, and I thought the applicant did a wonderful job. He talked about an extracurricular that his friends sort of goaded him into participating in high school. And he did this, and his first attempt at it was awful, like terrible. He was embarrassed about it. He never wanted to go back. And a member of that organization reached out to him and really encouraged him, said, something similar happened to me. I promise it gets better. And he went back and he did it again, and it became his favorite activity. He did it all through college. And to me, that shows somebody who's willing to take a risk, somebody who's willing to pick him or herself back up again, try it again. You will get better. I promise this will improve. And so for me, that showed not only that that person had resilience, that they could handle something that didn't go their way initially, but also that they learned how to lean into community, which is a huge part of what we do here, right? We support one another, and now that support that this applicant is lending to newer people who are in that organization now.
Love that.
I think that is such an important point in this cycle. And I will say this is something that has evolved over my past several years that I've been reading files. As the quantitative scores go up and up, it's harder to distinguish between people who have, high metrics because they're really resilient and hardworking, and people who are just really good at academics but maybe don't have the life experience and the tools to truly face the obstacles that will come with law school and a legal career. And so as I'm reading files this cycle, I'm really taking a hard eye to exactly the kind of information Jen was just talking about, right? I see that you're really good at getting an A in class, but I also need to see that you know when to ask for help, or that you can get up when you fall down, and that you have some of those soft skills that are going to round you out a little bit so that you don't kind of sink at the first sign of distress.
So well said, and it ties into what we were just saying earlier, which is like being a lawyer is not for everybody. Just because you did very well in school and you're good on standardized tests, there are so many other paths. Of course, and I think all of us agree that being a lawyer is it's an incredible profession. It's a noble profession. I think there are so many things you can do with a law degree, but it's more than just that. You really have to have these, again, tools to succeed. Executive functioning, like being organized is, when I read a letter of recommendation from a supervisor and it's like, this is the person who was keeping us all on task, that is a great sign for me. This is the person who was here early and staying late. That is a great sign of work ethic. It is going to be those things that go beyond the GPA and the LSAT. How are you going to deal not only in law school, but when it really gets tough, which is in the practice of law?
Yeah, and I think actually a lot of people have these good raw materials and they have the values that we're looking for. I think part of the challenge is really being able to communicate that effectively. And, actually they discussed this on the career piece, which was like, you would be surprised at what is translatable in other categories. So you might think like, hey, what is this, intramural basketball, right? But, it's more than just that, right? Like it is, yes, an activity of wellness, but also like, hey, what is it like to collaborate on a team? What's it like to balance my day so that I have time for this while I maintain these great grades, right? What does it mean to be a leader who manages to pay all of the dues and organize all of the t-shirts, right? So that's just like such a small example, but, we, I think, are good at looking for that, but you don't want to make us do all of the work.
I'm glad you brought up the careers episode. That was the most recent episode, the finale of season 7. And the reason it's important to bring up is because law students now, unlike when we were in school, have to balance a very rigorous, challenging course load as a 1L with finding a job. And that is not easy. And that has caused, I'll be honest, a lot of anxiety and a lot of angst and a lot of stress. Because suddenly you are studying for finals and you're also fielding interview requests or you're actively applying for jobs. And that is a lot. And so to Rosanne's point, seeing that you have balanced things before, seeing that you have managed periods of stress without falling apart, think about, are you communicating that to us? In your application as a whole. I think sometimes, unfortunately, and we can talk about this later when we talk about individual pieces of the application, I think unintentionally, sometimes people are communicating the opposite to us. The listeners can't see, but there are some heavily nodding heads because this is happening more and more. I feel that I'm really excited about an application, and then the more I read, it's like, oh, why did you tell me this thing that now makes me very much question your ability to manage this environment? So we can talk about that a little bit more later. But I just want to clarify, I'd be curious what you guys think, because as Katie said, her reading has evolved. And I think it's good for our reading to evolve because applicants evolve and the pool evolves and who we are seeing and what we are seeing evolves. So I think it's always good to think of things slightly differently if necessary. I used to think it didn't really matter if you had a specific legal field in mind. And now I actually think that's a really good sign if you have specified an interest that's backed up by something, because it tells me a little bit more that you have considered this carefully. Having said that, it's not a red flag if you are keeping a very open mind and you're willing to do anything. But I will say, maybe I have said this before, but I don't think I have. I do think it's a good sign if somebody has specifically been in, let's say, antitrust, and now they know that that's for them. That person could change their mind. But I think having a clear purpose for law school is the number one thing. Having a specific interest could be an added bonus, again, if it's backed up. And none of that precludes changing your mind and pivoting down the line. It's all about authenticity, I feel. You know, you have to tell us where you are at the time you're there, and taking in new information and changing your plan or pivoting is going to be part of that regardless. Let's talk about rankings. We had a conversation about this in our office the other day with the whole team. Ironically, after all the law schools decided to boycott U.S. News, the rankings seem to have more of a hold on people than ever. Do you guys agree?
I think they're talked about more than ever. I don't know if I have a gauge on how they're playing into people's decision making.
Mm-hmm. And how, if at all, do you think they should play into people's decision making?
I think people should be looking really closely at the data that supports those rankings, because being a number one, or in our case, a number 4 school, right? That's an abstract conglomeration of a lot of different things. And some of the data that went into that determination is going to be really meaningful to you. And some of it is not stuff you're really thinking about or caring about, right? It's not relevant to your career and your choice. I think it's important for applicants to understand where those rankings come from. And they largely come from the reporting that the law schools do to the ABA. We also do that reporting to you. It is publicly available on our website. Any accredited law school will have that information publicly available to them.
Yeah, if you Google UVA Law ABA 509 or whatever law school ABA 509,
yes,
you will be directed right to their most recent 509 reports, which come out in December of every year. But yes, continue.
So, if you're thinking to yourself, well, if a school has a high ranking, I'm more likely to get a job. Okay, well, actually, if you go look at the 509, you're going to see the exact breakdown of the type of job that you can get from that school and the type of geographic location you can end up in. And that's the information you really need to know. So, maybe let them be a guide to help you kind of get started, but you really got to do the footwork to find the school that's right for you, and the ranking is not going to do that.
Yeah, and because of the compression in sort of the way that they calculate the rankings, there's a lot of volatility. And just to remind listeners, if the rankings stayed the same every year, they would become irrelevant. So U.S. News knows that they do have to change a little bit year to year so that it's not just something someone can print out and hang on their wall and know for the rest of all time. It has to change year to year in order for them to stay relevant. And more than ever, the way that they've changed the metrics, there is a ton of volatility and compression at in the top 14, but especially, I would say, in the top 10. That means that one individual graduate's job outcome could impact that school's ranking, or one individual person not passing the bar can impact that school's ranking. Is that what you want to hang? I would not want to hang my hat on a number that is just based on one individual outcome because, again, of the high compression. So it's just something to think about. I think it's so much more important to focus on your personal fit with that law school. Of course, none of us are going to say going to a prestigious law school doesn't matter. It does. It actually really matters where you go to law school. But the number from year to year of where it falls on one ranking system out of many is not the marker of prestige. It's not how employers mark it. It's, not how law schools themselves mark their prestige. It's the experience you're getting at the law school, and it's the outcome you're getting at the law school.
I think it's also important here to, take even the data and the reports with a grain of salt, because they're really just raw numbers. Like every single one of those raw numbers is a human being with a whole life. And so many different perspectives. And it's the same thing that we do when we look at our applicants is like, yeah, you can have these amazing quants, but like, what did it take for that one person to get that job? Where is that person coming from? Why did they make that choice? And so, finding a nice balance for yourself where you also humanize that data with like backup information, whether it's like you go to an open house and you talk to someone who you identify with and are like, hey, like, what does this number mean and how did this impact how you experience law school at UVA, right? And I think sometimes people would be surprised that you can see a number and think it means one thing and assume that it means one thing, and then actually you realize that someone's lived experience is actually not that or is confirmed by that, right? But kind of a wide range of possibilities. Like numbers are numbers, and I get that. And, I work at admissions, so they're important to me. But I think part of the reason we're also motivated in this job, too, is because it really is beyond numbers, no matter what people want to assume is true about that.
For 100%, they're there for you. The data is there for you to use in your decision making. It should not be the end all be all. I'm glad that you brought up the people focus part of that, because at the end of the day, I firmly believe how well you do in law school is based on the people you surround yourself with and the culture and the community, and how much you like your job is going to depend on that too. So how you choose your law firm is going to be a lot about how you choose your law school. So visiting schools, all those things, making sure that you're thinking about things more than just this many people went to big law or whatever it is.
This is kind of a tangent, but I think it really is a good example, is I feel like a lot of people will look at UVA employment outcomes and say like, oh, public service must not be as strong there because fewer graduates go directly into public service. And it's like, we know actually that public service here is incredibly strong and has so many different resources, and that graduates who may start at big firms end up transitioning into government and public service like 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line. And that's why I'm like, it's so important to see like, hey, like, I'm not just going to assume that public service isn't as strong. Like, what would my support look like? What are the fellowship opportunities? What is my summer funding? What is my postgrad funding? And actually, I think if people, were to dig deep into that, like, they would realize, wow, what an amazing public service team that we're meeting with on January 28th at 2:30.
For sure. The data is a really great starting point. If you know what that data means, it means that that's where those people were working 10 months after graduation, not where they are 5 years later or 10 years later. And so talking to people who go to the school, talking to people who have graduated from the school, I think is going to arguably be more important, if not equally important, to the rankings. So just I guess the overall advice is, I think, again, this is relevant to this cycle maybe more than ever, because yet again, there's just a lot of noise about what's going to happen in the rankings, how they're going to be shaken up. Try to tune that out and focus on coming back to knowing yourself. Where are you going to be happy? Not where is the number 2 or number 1 or number 5 or number 10 law school.
And I'll just add to that, I think this rankings kind of mentality goes along with this idea that law school is a stepping stone, right? That it's just a place we sort of touch base, get the skills we need, and then we're going to go off to what the goal is. And there's some truth in that. But I think if you're somebody who's getting into UVA Law, you have a pretty good chance of getting into some other very fine legal institutions as well. And so when you say, am I going to have better outcomes at one law school versus another in those types of decisions? This is where the fit comes in, right? And I think, in my mind, I think about it less as a stepping stone and more as a, where do I want to build my foundation, right? Like, where do I want to go and really dig deep, yes, get the academics, get the professional skills, but also get the kinds of relationships that are setting me up for success beyond law school and in my legal career. And so having that sort of longer term mentality in making your choice, I think, can be helpful in making a decision. And as we said, discussing what are the values of this place, right? What are the people like? Rather than just where am I going to end up? Because I think the reality is that many people going to fine legal institutions will end up at wonderful places.
I have so much to say about that. I love the way you put that, building a foundation versus just, it's a springboard to go to the next place. Because not only is it your foundation, it's going to be your home. It's going to be something nobody can ever take away from you. It's going to be on your resume forever. It's going to be the diploma on your wall. It's going to be the alumni network you're part of. You're going to come back for reunions. You're going to be potentially one of the many, many, many alums who is now working at the law school. It reminds me of something that somebody said in a meeting I had the other day that I really loved. I think I mentioned it to you, Rosanne, which is there's a difference between people who approach things as transactional versus using the information to know themselves better and decide what's right for them. It's not just what's UVA Law going to do for me and how I'm going to get to the next point. It's like this is going to be a home for you for 3 years and beyond. And so approaching things as not just in this transactional way, I don't think I'm explaining it very well, but more from an authentic way and having the confidence to know yourself well enough that you can say, okay, this school is ranked much lower than my other schools, but this is the best place for me. This is where I want to build my foundation. And it also dovetails with something I touched on earlier, which is longevity. Many lawyers leave the law after a few years. A lot of them don't. I like to look for applicants who I think could have a really nice long legal career. Even if that's not what they want to do, who has the potential for that? Not just to go into big law and flame out after 6 months, but somebody who I think is really built for the profession.
Well, and the longevity ties back to the why.
Yeah.
Yeah, whether you go into big law or, almost maybe even more so into public service when you don't have the cushion of the big paycheck or the stability, and you have to be driven by kind of other things.
Right.
The why becomes more important there, and that's, I think, translates really well.
And if you've chosen the right law school, being happy in law school lends itself to longevity. Having your why lends itself to being happy. All of these things connect together. So I think this is all extremely big picture things, and can't necessarily be translated into one simple sentence or piece of advice. But I feel that these are things that are being neglected more, or maybe we're just looking for them more because the application pool is just so competitive that, and maybe after all of our combined years of experience in admissions, we have so many more data points of what actually lends success in law school and in a legal career. Curious to hear what the four of us talked about last time we were in the studio together? Be sure to check out Season 5, Episode 7 of the show, where my 3 directors discussed in more depth what they look for in applications and interviews, and shared advice for putting together a successful admissions package in any cycle.
They aren't necessarily using flowery language. They aren't trying to employ some sort of really clever writing mechanism in their personal statement. It's just straightforward and really, as cliche as it might sound, from the heart. You get that authenticity from them. And when you're able to see the determination, when you're able to see sort of the drive and the passion and what motivates people, those are the applications that you read and you know these people will be a good fit at UVA Law.
So some nuts and bolts on the application, specific to this cycle, but again, things we've seen before, things we will see again. I want to start with one thing, which is the LSAT. We are seeing large jumps in LSAT scores that are not being explained. And to me, more so than in the past, that is a red flag. Do any of you want to add to that? Everyone is too afraid to touch this topic.
I will say, though, that at least I personally have maybe given different advice in the past, right? In the past, I have said, like, if your LSAT score goes up 5-10 points, I'm just going to assume you studied harder unless you tell me something else is the cause for that. Yeah, I think given the complexity of the pool that we're working with now, I think that advice is a little dated. And, you know, I'm willing to self-correct a bit and say if you do have a very large jump, it might be worth acknowledging it in some way in a very short addendum.
I agree. I have similarly given the advice before, like, don't tell me something that's obvious from the application. Well, why is our advice on this changing a little bit? It's because there are an alarming number of high LSATs. I'll put it that way. When high LSATs were more sparse in the pool, you would assume somebody studied more and got a higher score. When everybody suddenly has at our median or above, and some of those people have taken it several times with jumps all over the place, that's when things start to become, I would say, not suspicious, but I just need more information. So Katie's exactly right. I used to say, we're reading enough, don't send an addendum if it's a jump in your LSAT. And I would say still don't if it's, a few points here. But if you're jumping double-digit points from 1 month to the next, putting on your cynical hat for a moment, just think about what we might be thinking about, and take your opportunity to explain what happened. Again, short and sweet and to the point. No excuses, no nothing, just modified my study habits or what have you. And I ask about this in interviews because gaming the LSAT is, clearly a skill that a lot of people have. And I can tell you right now, it does not equate to success in law school. And that's what we care about. I'm very happy for you that you were able to game the system and get a certain score. That's not going to bode well in law school or in the practice of law, and that's what we care about. So if there is a straightforward, very reasonable explanation, provide it, and just know that I don't think I speak for just UVA. I think all admissions committees are looking at LSAT history very carefully. So what about AI? We have gotten more and more questions about the use of AI. In our application, we say I certify that I have not used artificial intelligence to draft my application or whatever it says. We've been getting more and more questions about, hey, what if I put my personal statement into an AI tool and have it correct all of the grammar? What do you all think about that?
That's fine, as long as in the correcting of the grammar, you haven't wiped the personality, which I do think is happening in some situations.
Or people ask, can I use a thesaurus? I use a thesaurus all the time. So hopefully, I just Google whatever the word is and then synonym. I do this constantly. I think that is completely fine. But Katie's right. It's a slippery slope because I've said this before and I'll say it again. If it sounds like your essay was drafted by AI, it might as well have been drafted by AI because it's not going to sound authentic and it's not going to sound good. And it's not going to be something that's easy for us to connect with. And that's what we're trying to do at the end of the day.
So what really bums me out, so I will read an application and there are LORs, letters of recommendation from professors who are raving about what a great writer somebody is.
It's happening all the time.
And then I read their essays, and their essays read just like everybody else's essays. They're not special. They're not standout. They're fine. I think that person did themselves probably a very grave disservice and utilized AI when they should have trusted themselves to write the essay with their own personality and their own flaws and their own everything, own tone. I will say a lot of the essays are starting to read the same. They're starting to sound the same. The content might be different, but the structure and the tone is the same. And so when a good writer writes us a good essay with their own brain, it stands out. And I get excited about those people. And if you're a person who's capable of doing that, please trust yourself to do it. Don't outsource this to a computer. It won't be as good.
Yeah. Very well said. I couldn't agree more. This is happening a lot this cycle. What the letter writers say about the writing skills is not matching up. And I have seen more than ever really high quants, meaning GPA and LSAT, with rather poor, whether AI assisted or not, rather poor writing.
Well, and we have an LSAT writing sample too. So like when I'm reading and I'm like, ooh, this seems very AI-ish, I'm like, I have multiple pieces of your writing. And one that I know is under a specific set of circumstances where you weren't able to use AI. And do those match up? And you know what? To be perfectly honest, there are some people, and I read them and I'm like, oh, I think that might just be them. But then I would say more often than not, like, and I think this is a tool that we're all refining, you're like, yeah, that's really kind of not a match.
Yeah. I really think it can't be overstated, which is this cycle more than any cycle I've ever been in, and this is my 11th law school admission cycle. Numbers mean almost nothing. Like, I see one in a queue, and I used to say, whoa, this person is going to be fantastic. And that correlation is getting weaker and weaker. And I say that so that people know, not only, that there's two sides of a coin. If you have the strong numbers, nothing can be assumed at this point. You cannot assume that you're getting in on your numbers because everyone is having strong numbers. I would also say on the flip side, people with lower numbers, we have been taking them. We have been taking quite a lot of them because sometimes those applications are so refreshing and they are so great to read and they have all the skills we've talked about. And their numbers are at a point where we feel confident that they are going to be just fine, but they don't need to be through the roof.
I do wonder if that accounts for some of the mediocre writing, is that people are resting on the laurels of the quantitatives that they're bringing, and they think that's going to be sufficient. They can sort of slapdash an application together. And then I think the converse of that is that when you see somebody who's had excellent writing, we all know the time that takes, right? So that's another indicator to us of someone who's willing to sort of sit with this challenge, this discomfort of how am I going to present myself in a really authentic way. And they've been willing to put in the time and the work, because that doesn't happen in one draft and that doesn't happen in two drafts. And again, it's just another indicator for us, I think, that this is a person who's willing to put the work in to do the job well.
How do you all feel just in general about interviews, how they're matching up to the applications this cycle specifically? Do you feel like no surprises? People are kind of what you expect based on the application?
I think for the most part, I don't know. I will say I have been very picky in reading and recommending people for interview. And I think that has led to some pretty solid accuracy for the most part with what I expect to get when I'm going into an interview. Obviously, that's not the case across the board. There have been some not so great interviews along the way.
I also want to say, in a forum such as this, where we are providing advice, it's almost impossible to provide advice without saying what people are doing wrong, right? Because if people were doing everything right, we would have nothing to say. But I also, I hope this episode comes off as like from a positive place, which is we are seeing so many great applications. It's very difficult to decide between them. And if you're somebody who's listening to this, we're trying to give you every possible little tip we can, because it's just going to be super, super competitive. And having said that, I think maybe the last piece of the app that I wanted to chat about is the YUVA essay. This comes up every single year. Every single year it comes up. We try to change the prompt to make it more personal. That confuses people. We go back to the bare bones prompt. That goes back to lead people to just listing things off the website. And so they're not being that personal. But I will say, I have read some really fantastic YUVAs this cycle. I don't know if you guys feel the same, but I have read some really great ones that read genuine, even if the person has zero connection to the school, which, as a reminder, you do not need. They just feel I feel that people are putting good effort into them, and they're coming across well. Again, as Katie said, not across the board. If you don't feel that you're adding value to your application by writing one, just don't write one. It's okay. We have actually interviewed a ton of people this cycle who didn't write one because there are those other indicators in the app.
And I hope someone's listening to this who tells everybody else, because I feel like that message has actually gotten lost. Because I think for every single good one that I feel like I have read probably 15 really unhelpful ones. And, it's great for the people who write great ones because it really, really, really makes them stand out. And I think it's also important to say, like, not answering a YUVA doesn't mean that you're not putting in the effort, right? Like, I feel like people feel like they need to check that box and be like, hey, I cared enough to write this. But, we are a particular kind of school. Like, we've told you, like, these are the values that we're looking for. You are better off writing an amazing Q13 than a mediocre YUVA.
Yes.
I'm nodding emphatically.
Yeah.
Yes, everyone's nodding emphatically because every single piece of your application needs to do something. And if you're just phoning it in, it's not doing anything for you the way that a Q13 could do.
It's counterproductive. Like, we have officially entered the phase of the cycle where I'm getting grumpy if you've given me a 2-page essay that says nothing and I'm reading it when I've got hundreds of applications that I'm trying to read. So you might actually be hurting yourself.
And I think this is also a good place to kind of bring back old advice, which is like show, don't tell. I think one of our other colleagues who helps us out sometimes, like, she writes us, she's like, oh my gosh, they're not showing, they're just telling. And, it's more powerful when you show. Yeah. And I think, we're a school that cares a lot about whether or not you show that, because that's the kind of community that we are striving to build, where people know each other and they care about, kind of the smaller building blocks of who we are and what our experiences are. And so we don't need to tell us. We know these people. We know these faculty members. We know these law students. Yep. What we need to know is about you and why what they're saying or have connected with you about makes sense for you.
I think that is the key, is to remember what is the purpose of the YUVA, right? It's to give you a place to show a genuine interest in the school, in the programs, whatever's drawing you there. And that can be done through, I like to say, breadcrumbs throughout the application.
I've been reading this lately.
There's you can find them when people say where they want to have their geographic preference for where they're going to practice law. Or maybe they drop in the Q13 or the PS that they've got a family member in Charlottesville. There are multiple different ways to sort of tell us you've got some sort of personal connection to the school, to the area, that it really makes sense for you to be here because of your interest in planning law or whatever it might be, without writing a separate YUVA.
Or even people who just have the community involvement, the extracurriculars, the sort of the personality that we like to see. We are absolutely going after those people. Rest assured that if you don't write one, and we like the file, we're going to move forward. But just the same way that I tell people, if you are really applying to law school from a place of purpose and certainty, your personal statement should be practically falling onto the page. You shouldn't have to, or you should have 5 different ideas that you're thinking, but you shouldn't have to sit there. Why do I want to go to law school? Because you should have that purpose. And it's more, I'm not diminishing the writing process. It's long, it's arduous. It takes a long time to make it sound great. But for the YUVA, I feel the best ones are ones that are just coming from, this is how they genuinely feel, and it's on the page. It's not that they sat there and did all the research and listed all the courses, right? Like, these things, again, it takes time, it takes energy, it takes finesse, it takes writing skills to put them on the page. But the ideas of what you want to say should be readily available. And if they aren't, I think for the YUVA piece at least, I think it's okay to skip it. I will also say, I've said this on the podcast before, I think it bears repeating this cycle especially. Yes, we're giving you advice at the margins that we think is helpful. And just remember that no application is perfect.
You know, I feel like every season I have one element of the application that is like a major player. And I almost think like given how things have evolved, and I feel like the last time we were here, it was like letters of recommendation. And maybe, you know, Katie and I had our first episode and it was like 30 minutes about the personal statement. You know, I think for me right now, it's the resume, actually. And maybe this has to do a lot with like the drive for high quants and like high LSAT and high GPA that people are totally foregoing doing other things or like doing the things that they love and care about. And, you know, it's not a bad strategy, right? But it might be a bad strategy for a school like UVA, right? That where we are so focused on, you know, community and fit and what you're like as a community member that I, you know, have read so many strong quants this year, but then I go on their resume and I'm like, I don't think you would like it here. I think that you would rather like go back to your house and read a book and read 20 more books and then come back to class and then do it over and over again, right? Which I'm sure we have some of those people too. But at the same time, I'm like, hey, if you're going to maximize this experience, if you're going to maximize the things that UVA Law is known for, like quants aside even, like I want people who are going to show up. And, you know, I had a really great interview last week and, you know, I feel like everyone's going to say this answer, but like, you know, here's a freebie question that I ask 1 out of 5 times. But I'm like, you know, what's your favorite thing about yourself? And she had said, you know, I love that I am a long-term friend. She's like, I am not a transactional person. I am in it for the long haul. And I was like, you will be great here. Right. So it's things like that where I'm like, those are the breadcrumbs. Like, you know, I think a lot of breadcrumbs appear on the resume, too, even if it's something as basic as like interests and hobbies. Right. And not even to mention like the very obvious part of the resume, which is like, hey, what are my professional experiences, et cetera. But I feel like there has just been such an effort to increase these numbers and make things look so professional that you lose the humanity of your own application, which is the part that we endeavor to look for on top of all of the other things we have to look for.
I completely agree with everything Rosanne just said. I think the resume is also my number one piece right now because, you know, we've been saying show us, don't tell us. That's where you show, right? That's where it shows. Like, okay, so you tell me you're incredibly passionate about the environment, and yet you have done nothing in your life that has indicated that, right?
Absolutely. And piggybacking off of that, saying that the personality details get lost, or, you know, the resumes where those can go, the hobbies and interest section is where that can go. Obviously, your interview questions is where that can go. I really hope if you've gotten nothing else from this episode and previous ones where all of us are in the studio talking about these things, a big part of my goal is for you to realize there are real people here who are reading your applications. We are just 4 people who have our own interests, who have our own hobbies, who play the flute, who are going to the Grand Canyon, who wore glasses on Guantanamo Bay. Like, the reason that I'm saying that is because without you giving us personality in the application, it's very hard for us to connect with you. And at the end of the day, the admissions committee wants to connect with you because taking it one step further, we want to know what you're going to be like when you are in the community, connecting with your classmates, connecting with faculty. If you can't connect at the admissions stage, it's problematic and it's not going to bode well for your legal career. And I do think for many different reasons, it is getting harder and harder, either to show that in an application or to have that genuinely. And I think those are the things that, if you have those things, it's your job to convey them to us in a meaningful way that gets us excited. Anything else that we want to talk about the application specifically, or advice that we have not shared that we want to share for 2026?
In the fall, I spent quite a bit of time at various colleges talking to people who are kind of staring down the barrel of what am I going to do next? And so I just want to give some like kind of mom advice. Like, it's going to be okay, right? It might be hard, but don't make decisions out of fear. Don't make choices, because you can't think of something better. I'm getting, in those conversations, I was getting the impression that people are just kind of scrambling to figure out what they're going to do. Law school should not be that thing that you scramble to, right? It should be a very deliberate life choice. And until you're ready for that, find something else. But it will be okay. Just keep looking.
It's scary out there. And I get why people are scared and scrambling. The economy for college graduates specifically is challenging. And law school can seem like a safe haven. But as many lawyers as I know who are thrilled with their jobs and are going strong and who love it and would never look back, there are a lot of people who wish they didn't go to law school and who have a lot of debt. And it just really needs to be carefully considered. And I really love that advice. It is going to be okay. It's all going to be okay, whether you get into this law school, another law school, no law school. At the very least, take the pause to work for a year or volunteer for a year or do something if you're not 100% at that purpose yet, because we don't want that for you. And so those are going to be the applications that we might be pausing on.
One of the things that I have noticed, and I don't know if, applicants realize like what a small community it is. I would say when you are engaging with people in our community, whether they are alums or students or faculty members, more is not more. So, please don't just like reach out to people to have, touch points. Like, I think so many members of our community are excited to like be a resource or to be helpful, or they put on events that, help make students, excited about UVA. But, more and more I'm getting people who are like, I talk to 8 million people. And, hey, if you come on a tour and you're talking to these students and it's a very organic process, great. If it's like, I am blasting 8 million people on LinkedIn and just using time and resources ineffectively, I think that is a totally different conversation. So I think I would really love people to know, like, hey, when you drop a name in one of those, if I know that person, I'm going to be like, hey, listen, what do you think of this person? Do you like them? And, I've had a lot of people who kind of just boldly reach out to a lot of our faculty members, and they do circle back with us, right?
Oh, yeah.
And, I've had feedback from a faculty member that I had lunch with today, and she was like, yeah, this person like reached out to me, and it was like so off-putting because it was off topic. Like, or it was something tangential to something that she did, but not an obvious thing. And, expecting advice or expecting a recommendation from someone that you've never met, I think is one of the things that I want people to pay attention to. Like, and maybe it's that drive for YUVA content that is kind of steering people's decision making. But again, like, you don't have to do all of that. If you are the good fit, there are other ways to demonstrate that, which would honestly be stronger than just collecting a pool of people and hoping that that translates into something.
Yeah, I would recommend not reaching out to faculty, maybe until you are a student in the building. Because, and look, our faculty are amazing. They will talk to you. They will. And they will, like Rosanne just said, they will circle back to us and say so-and-so reached out. Just be aware that it's not always a positive touch point that they are having to report.
Yeah, because so much of that process, too, is like, are you a good community member? Are you someone who is thoughtful about people's time and effort, right? And so that's something that I think about a lot, just as someone who's protective of our own students and how they use their time and their willingness to help people. So making sure that if you do that, or you kind of come across our students organically, or maybe they are summering at your firm, like, it is more effective to have a genuine connection with someone than to force create one that may not make sense.
And giving applicants the benefit of the doubt, I have heard a lot of advice out there telling them to do things like that. So I know it can be really confusing. I think if you do want to reach out to somebody, I think reach out to one person, and I think that would be okay. But right, always with being mindful of that person's time and being respectful of their time. I think there is advice going around right now that's like cold contacting people is good and giving them an action item. You know, can we have a phone call? Can we have a meeting? This is advice that I have heard on other resources that I personally disagree with.
But might make sense for other places. But it does not make sense for us. Yeah.
And so that's why I'm saying, like, I think applicants are really trying to help themselves and really trying to do what they've been told to do, but thinking carefully about tailoring that advice to the institution is very helpful, I think, for them to hear. I just want to reiterate again, it's hard to do a show like this without, pointing out things that people are doing that maybe we don't love, but we love what we do. We love reading applications. We are in the thick of it. It's January. This is our absolute busiest time. And this podcast is, nobody's getting paid extra to do this podcast. It is actually more work to do it on top of what we already do. But we want you to know that we are here and that we're reading, and we want to give you as much helpful advice as we can. And so I hope that this has been helpful for people. And I just want to end on the positive note, which is we have thousands of applicants that are admissible. That's the fact. We sent a rather large waitlist and deny wave out just yesterday, and a lot of people, I think, were asking, well, what about me? I haven't been interviewed yet, and I haven't been waitlisted. I haven't been denied. Do you know what that means? That means that your file is viable. But at the same time, we've made more than half the offers we're going to make this whole cycle. So if you do the math, nothing about how this cycle ends for you should tell you anything meaningfully about your worth as a person or about your potential to succeed in law school, any law school, in the legal profession. It's just that competitive. We have a couple thousand files that we are holding on to because they could very well be admitted in the future. And I just want people to know that it's going to be a tough one. And again, on ending on a positive, there are just so many great things we're seeing. The people we've admitted, the people we've interviewed, the people who have visited are phenomenal, and we're really, really excited about them. Well, Katie, Rosanne, Jen, thank you guys so much for being here. It's a joy to be together, even though we're together every day in the office. It's fun to have you all in the studio, and really, I'm just so grateful for all of you and your judgment and the care you put into this process. And I hope that listeners, can hear that come through. This has been Admissible with me, Dean Natalie Blazer at the University of Virginia School of Law. My guests today were UVA Law's 3 directors of admission, Katie Delsandro, Rosanne Ibanez, and Jennifer Echemendia. The next episode of Admissible will be out soon. In the meantime, you can follow the show on Instagram at Admissible Podcast. Thanks so much for listening, and please remember to rate the show wherever you listen to podcasts.